So hi, I'm Melanie Reid. I'm Head of Digital at Waltham Forest Council. I've also got Will Callahan with me. Have I pronounced your name right, Will?
Yes, you have. I'm product lead at LocalGov Drupal. It's nice to see you all.
Thanks, Will. Okay, so I'm going to do the first half and just talk about some of our experiences of joining LocalGov Drupal from Waltham Forest perspective, and then I'll hand over to Will in the second half. Okay, so I first found out about this amazing project back in February 2020 when I went to an event about Drupal, and this presentation was very much what was presented to me, and it was talking about how councils spend a lot of time rebuilding, recreating publishing platforms or content management systems that are often referred to over and over again, and the opportunity was to kind of stop doing this and actually share a collaborative platform where we can all share the code and draw down on that and then make it our own and use it however we wish to, so we can still brand and make the front end very unique to our local residents and our councils while still having that kind of infrastructure that we can all share because we're all doing repeatable processes around that. So this is really talking about how LocalGov Drupal works and what we've done at Waltham Forest. So start with, so once I'd been to that presentation, I came back to the office and I said, oh, I've heard about this amazing project. And then about a couple of weeks later, COVID hit and we kind of put everything on stall. And then we started really in earnest in the summer of 2020. And I went back to the team and I said, look, there's this repository, let's just download it, let's just install it, let's see what we can do. And luckily enough, we've got a team of in-house developers, so they installed a version of it and kind of we played with it. And at that point as well, I reached out to Will and his team to just get more involved and get an understanding of what's on the roadmap and what else the product was going to offer. So some of the really nice things about it is obviously how it works is we've got Drupal core that sits at the base, and then on top of that you've got your service pages, which is your very much bread and butter council service pages that we all offer and are all very similar. And then within that there are guide pages, which I'll talk a bit more about later. Step-by-step pages, subsites, events, which is something Waltham Forest built on. So I'll also tell you a bit about that, directories and news. And it's incredibly flexible, so you can bring in modules that you want to use, but you don't have to switch on everything or use every feature. And this is just a potential sort of information architecture view of that. This is our specific experience. So like I said, we joined in, we started work in the summer and we went live a couple of weeks ago, so the end of November. And so it's really quick. I mean, considering COVID slowed us down, we've saved lots of time. So the benefits for us were really around timescales. It would have taken us, I've put 3 to 6 months, but I think in reality it was easily 6 months of development time that we would have had to spend just building the core infrastructure that was already there in GitHub for us to download. Particularly with us in Waltham Forest, we're quite reliant on third-party suppliers, which we wanted to bring back ownership and take ownership of our code and our infrastructure and actually be able to move much more to an iterative approach of development. So we wanted to build on what we've got and kind of make it better. And in the past, we've very much kind of launched something and then not really had full ownership of it. And it's been expensive to then make lots of changes and modifications. So we wanted to move away from that model. We wanted a better CMS. CMS we were using was quite clunky. Again, we had limited ability to change the content management system, and we wanted something where we could democratize our content out so that we could get teams making smaller edits and making them quicker, so they're not relying on everything coming through digital to make those changes. We've wanted to enable us to focus on, and by freeing up this time, we were able to focus on extra things that we hadn't planned in our original sort of beta one phase one of the project. So that was enhanced events. So we had a core build of events within the the code, but we were able to then draw that down and actually build on top of that. So we had a developer that worked up the events. And so Waltham Forest, as we were the first borough of culture, we were really keen to have events as a real sort of draw for our residents. They love the lots of diverse events that we have across the borough, so it's a really exciting way of building that. The other thing we wanted was the search first approach, so really having a really nice robust search with predictive search, filtering, and having really good tagging on all of our content. So again, we were able to build the infrastructure around that, and we've built on top of the core code, we've also built a taxonomy so that we can tag all of our content, and then in addition we're using Solar Search to do the actual searching. And then we also led on the content lifecycle work, and that's really about again, that ties in with the democratization and us wanting a better CMS. So we one of my team did a fantastic job sitting on that product group that was a smaller kind of working group specifically around content lifecycle work. And again, it's a really nice benefit of working collaboratively with other councils, because they'll bring different perspectives and different best practice, and so we can kind of share that rather than it just being one person thinking this through. And that whole life cycle piece is around how we publish content, and that's been really successful for us, and we've already started training people. We only launched, like I said, relatively recently. We've already trained people, we've always got people using the new content management system, which is just fantastic. And then some of the other benefits were that we had features that we weren't going to use. We hadn't even considered using guided processes, which is a really nice way of guiding someone through some difficult processes where it might be a really long page where there's lots of information to gather and pull together, and by having it in a guided process you can kind of break that content down and make it much nicer. It was a really good learning curve for us on using Agile. We are already using Agile as a team, but it's nice to see it in practice and to actually be part of that and kind of take, for me, I took away a lot from the product meetings on how we ran our own projects within Waltham Forest. Like I've already mentioned, the knowledge sharing was just fantastic. You know, you could ask a quick question in Slack, and generally there's another council that's done something similar. And then for us, it was really important to meet our accessibility legislation. We'd had the Cabinet Office contact us, and actually it wasn't just about the sort of stick of the Cabinet Office, but it's also our own ethos around our equality and diversity agenda, and we really wanted the website to be really, really accessible. So that's been a really big win for us. Our accessibility score, I should say, has gone from 74 up to 95%, and we're aiming for 100. And you know, a lot of that comes down to the core code and the fact that it's been really well written and really has accessibility front and centre. So it's really about, in addition, making sure your content is accessible. So these are some of the issues that we had before. So some of it's around accessibility. So our top navigation didn't meet accessibility guidelines because obviously you can hardly see it. Like I said, the search was really poor. Residents often complained to us about how poor the search was, and they couldn't find what they were looking for. The service information was quite overwhelming, and we did some user testing on this, and we've broken it down into 4 areas: apply, pay for it, etc. So it's much easier, nicer user journey. We had problems with accessibility with the way text was overlaid, and like I've already said, the current site was incredibly inflexible, and the content, we've spent a lot of time rewriting that as well. So now this is our new site, so the navigation is much more visible and accessible. We've got really nice sort of mobile first approach. The menu drops down and lists out the services in a much more accessible way. The search is improved, like I've already said. We've got natural language, suggested searches and filtering. With the new service layout, our residents, when we tested them, 95% success rate on that, so it's much more streamlined and much easier. I've already talked about events. We wanted to really feature the different activities that we've got on across the borough and just make it a hub for activities. And the same with kind of our campaigns and volunteering opportunities. We've done a lot of work around featuring those so that we kind of get people involved. And like I said, the design now is so much more flexible. We're you can use modules and drop them in into individual pages and make it much more flexible to use. We're able to get the new features from LocalGov Drupal, so we're already looking at the work that's been done on the communities and what's it called, the directories, sorry, and mapping some of our services. And we've got a new publishing model, which I've also mentioned. So this is another example where we've used guide pages. So before we had this really long page with lots of information on primary schools, and now we've really condensed this down into a really nice, simple, much easier user journey. And I think already it's paying off. Our residents have been really complimentary of what we've done, which is great. So shall I hand over to Will? Do you want to talk about Cumbria's experience?
Yeah. Yes, please. Thank you, Melanie. That was brilliant. So my home council, in fact, the home council of LocalGov Drupal is Cumbria, and we've taken the LocalGov Drupal code as well, and we built something. So if you want to click ahead, Melanie, I'll just explain. So if you go to the cumbria.gov.uk website, it's not our finest hour, I must say. It's quite old. The content hasn't been rewritten for a long time. It's based on a CMS called Tridion, which, you know, it's not the latest version of that either. And it's really being held together in-house by one developer, and he's the only person who can actually build anything with it. So next slide, please. You can actually go and look at the alpha that we built in Cumbria. So we took one section. Confusingly, it wasn't adult health and social care, it's births, marriages and deaths, I think. So if you go on the Cumbria website and click on that section, you will see it. But it's this layout. So we did a bit of, we used the new LocalGov Drupal base theme. We did some minor customization work to that. You can see some of that here. It didn't take very long. It was very easy to do. And then we rewrote an entire section, so the birth section. Next slide, please. And then we measured the difference pre and post. So in the call center, we used some software called Liberty Create, which I'm sure a lot of you use. And on the section we changed, we did a proper content design job on that section. Contact volumes were down 21%. The time spent on individual calls down 25%. And if we did this work across all the sections, we'd be looking at savings of 1 FTE. It's only a small call centre, there's 5 people. We can go and use that person to do something else, which is what we intend to do. We've also got pre and post tracking on the website. I don't have any figures for you yet. It's a problem with Site Improve that we're trying to fix. But generally, it's all looking great. We didn't have a feedback form on the old site, but historically feedback hasn't been great. But on the new site, 70% nearly are satisfied or very satisfied. So, overall, we're doing, a pretty good job. And the plan is to roll this out to other sections now starting in the new year. So it's all looking good. But I'll tell you how we got here. Next slide, please. So the LocalGov Drupal project has actually been 3 separate projects funded by MHCLG, or DLOC as they're known, as they're called now. So a few years ago, we did a discovery where we asked a lot of councils whether they were in a mood for sharing, and specifically sharing Drupal code, and the answer to that was happily yes. And then we went on and completed an alpha where we had some code already. The project originated in Brighton, where I was a product manager, and then I moved to Croydon, and the 2 councils decided to share code. So there was some code already around, but the alpha, the funded alpha that we did with DLOC allowed us to actually genericize that code, iron out all the kinks in it, work out how we were going to collaborate at a greater scale. So that was a really good project to do. And then a few weeks ago, we finished our beta, which was adding more features again, including the content lifecycle work that Melanie was mentioning. That was a massive win for us. Also trying to work out how we're going to scale further. And, what's the business model ultimately for this, which we can answer questions about. We like doing mission patches. You've probably seen some of these around. You may have them in your own councils. So from the top to the bottom, the pink hat was worn by our delivery manager in Discovery, never to be seen again, hopefully. And the cat is my cat, Stobbinge, don't ask. And then the dog is one of our developers' dogs called Muttley. And I think they're a product of COVID, really. We've been doing all of this project online. in calls like this, and wearing headphones and generally making it happen. So they're a product of this time that we've been in, I think, and we really love them. We'll make more. Next slide, please. Oh, and stickers are available. They always are, and everyone involved with the project always gets a sticker for their involvement. In terms of the councils that are involved, well, lots. I'm not going to read out all of these names, but Waltham Forest was very early to the table, and they've been absolutely fabulous. So thanks, Melanie, again for your help. During beta, so the sort of last 6 months or so, we've seen an enormous lift off in the interest, and you can see some of the names of councils there. Most of them are either building now or procuring, and there's 2 we can't name yet, but we'll hopefully announce them shortly. But it's been a massive sort of surge of interest, which we're delighted to see. Some of the councils are on Drupal already, 7 or 8. There's quite a few that aren't, and they want to move across, and they see this as part of the kind of move that Melanie was talking around. It's about taking control of your own website, being able to build for yourself. All of these councils want to go on that journey. They want to own the thing that you know, their main platform. So you know, we're helping them to do that in a small way, which is brilliant. Here's a tweet from one of the developers that was involved, Mark Conroy. He does live Twitch streams of his development work, which is amazing. It's a real sight to see. If you look him up on Twitter, you'll see some of that. But you know, for developers, whether he's in an agency, but there's lots of developers in councils, we're getting this sentiment all the way through. It's open source work, it's publicly funded, but it's properly funded, and we're able to really max out the value and do the things that we would have never been able to afford. I mean, Melanie talked about it earlier, but in Brighton, where I started out, I managed to get a lot of work done, but ultimately we ran out of money because we just couldn't do everything that we really needed to do. And now we're finding that councils don't have to spend money on the basics anymore. They can spend it on the game-changing features that they really need. And we're seeing this more and more with the LocalGov Drupal councils, which is excellent. How we work together. So very briefly, we are made of groups. There are a lot of councils here, so we can't all get together in one room, and it would make no sense. But we've got a steering group at the centre, a product group and a technical group and a comms group. That's like the core of LocalGov Drupal. If you click on one more, Melanie explains what they are. So the product group basically is working out what we're going to build next. What are the user needs that underpin the product, and prioritising those and making a roadmap, which you know is well advanced. The technical group is obviously how are we going to build the things that we've said we're going to do, and what are the best architectural decisions we can make that satisfy all the councils. And then in the middle, the steering group is really about sustainability and morale, and you know, staying sane amongst all the crazy chaos that's going on, but making sure that we're around and that people enjoy the work. You know, it's a big part of it that, you know, we're coming here to do good work. And a lot of people in councils tell us this is their favourite bit of the job. I mean, it's certainly the favourite bit of my job. I love collaborating, and we've got a lot of value from doing that. Next slide, please.
I would agree completely. I think the steering group is fantastic. So
yeah, we hear it all the time, which is great.
And it's not just about it's about driving that project forward, and I think everyone involved has got really big vision on where they want it to go, and it's a joined vision, and you know, I think that's really important. And you know, we're talking about governance and how it's going to work, and as we grow, and really, you know, being a sustainable long-term product. It's not something that's just here whilst we're getting funding. It's about how we grow it and build it over time. Yeah,
absolutely. So the main groups that do work are these little things in purple around the edges. They're working groups. We set them up when we want to build a brand new feature. And a good example of that is what Melanie spoke about earlier, content lifecycle. So we had some workflow in the product. We thought it was all right. It could actually be quite a lot better. And Waltham Forest said, actually, we've got some time to take this on and do some discovery and push this forward. So Waltham Forest founded the content lifecycle group, invited other councils to come and join, and then we moved ahead together as a group of, so I think it was 4 or 5 councils in that group,
Yeah.
And everybody gets the benefit of that work, which is fab. The forms working group is just 2 councils at the moment because they are so far ahead of everybody else in terms of forms. So it's Brighton and Croydon, and they're using Drupal web forms in Drupal 9, which is great, but it's almost got too much in it for a content designer to get their heads around. So they're actually saying, what's the standard set of web form components that a content designer really needs? So that, they're pushing that forward. I won't go through all the other groups because we'll be here all day, but we're a product of what the councils want to do. So a council comes and talks about a thing they want to do, and we gauge other people's interest, and then we move forward together. So, that's kind of how this works. And then these next 3 slides are just about a bit more detail around the individual working groups. So the base theme we didn't talk about just now, but we wanted to build a new base theme that was more flexible for everybody to use and easier to customize. We did that. Next one. Life cycle we've talked about already. Here's some screenshots from it. And led by David and Melanie in Waltham Forest. And then forms we mentioned. Forms we mentioned. This is going on now. So we're working out, or the group is working out, what components everybody needs. So this went out to all the groups and comments were made and things like that. And it's becoming really solid. So we're pleased with that. So what's next then? We have a roadmap for next year. In fact, before that, we got to the end of beta, and DLOC invited us to go back for continuous funding. So we applied. We're waiting to hear, but we're cross fingers. I think we'll get it. For a few things. So we've kind of outgrown our group of councils and led by a single council model, and we're intending to become a legal entity, I think no later than April 2023. So certainly over the next year, we're going to be working out the ins and outs of that. We're also wanting to build microsites, so the little annoying sites that we all have to maintain outside of our main Gov UK sites. There's got to be a better way of doing that. So we're going to work through this for everybody. And we're also very interested in skills development across the councils. We all want to do more. We're constrained on skills, we're constrained on time. So we've got ideas about how to fix that. So fingers crossed, we'll get some money for those things. And obviously, our site will have news about whether we're successful. And then in terms of the roadmap, the product group has restarted recently. And we've been talking about what we want to do next. Microsites is top of that list. We want to do more we've got a feature called directories. Content designers can make their own directories within LocalGov Drupal. We want to do more with that and kind of expand it out, maybe in a couple of directions. Local offer for sure, maybe planning maps and other things we're thinking about too. And also HTML publications. We all want to kill PDFs once and for all, which is probably too big a job to take on. But we're going to have a go. And those are our 3 big items for 2022. Next one, please. If you want to get started, if this is of interest to you, I guess there's 2 ways. So you can do as I think as Waltham Forest did. Yeah. Which is downloaded it. Went and downloaded it. So go to github.com. If you've got access to Drupal developers, and you do need a Drupal developer access to one. If you haven't got one, there's lots of agencies we know. We can give you a long list of people and tell you what they're all about, and then you can go and make your own choices, procurement decisions around. We can help you with that. Go and get the code from GitHub, download it, try it. It's as simple as that. And then if you don't ever want to talk to us again, that would be sad, but it's also fine. This is open source software that you can have with our blessing. So that's one option. Option number 2 is actually sort of join us for the long term, because we're going to be sticking around and adding to this code, and we want more councils to join and tell us what they'd like to see and be involved in the creation of these new things. So we've got an MOU. It's really short. You can go and read that. It doesn't commit you to anything. It's just about playing nicely and respectfully across all the councils. And if you're okay to sign that, you come join our Slack group. You come to our technical and product groups every month. you can join working groups and get stuck into building new features. And most councils do this. They come and they come, they like what they see, and then they sign up and they get going. So that's the other option. And I think that's it. So you can contact Melanie or myself, Melanie at Waltham Forest, or me at hello@localgovdrupal.org, or on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you.
Can I say thank you both very much for that presentation. Sorry, this is Eddie Copeland from the London Office of Technology and Innovation, jumping in at the end here with a view just to posing some questions that councils may have. And in fact, I think that was an incredibly thorough presentation, so I think my list is very small. In terms of any sort of prerequisites for councils who want to either engage quite actively, that option 2, or even just to download the code, does your council digital or IT team need to, is there anything they need to have in place in order to use this effectively from the experience of the 23 who've been involved to date?
Do you want to talk about your experience, Melanie?
Yeah.
Because I think you had what you needed to get going.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because I've got a team of Drupal developers, so I've got a full stack developer, a front-end developer, and then I've got a couple of apprentices. So they're sort of the development team that we've got. So it's relatively small. I mean, if we were going to recreate this with that team, it would have been a long old job. But yeah, so they just came in, downloaded the code, had a look, and yeah, we kind of took it from there, really. And I think what's been helpful is being part of the technical group for them as well, to be able to go in and ask questions. There's a lot of documentation out there as well, so you can kind of read things. You can ask questions on Slack, so developer to developer, which is really helpful. So that, I mean, that was the first thing. And then I think what's often overlooked is content design. Although we are democratizing out some of our editing, we still have a really solid content design team internally, and we've got a UX person as well, who's kind of leads the content team as well as doing UX. And I think they're really important roles if you're going to take this seriously, because it's not just about the infrastructure and having a really good content management system to manage it, and that takes away a lot of the pain points, but you still need to invest in having those content designers who understand how to build a page, how to write it, how to make it accessible, how to make it, you know, I mean, in our borough, 50% of our population, English is their second language, so it's really important that we make things very simple and very easy for people to read. And it just helps everyone, you know, and it helps you Google index you really nicely if you've got language that you're using and it's simple and easy to find. So it's just a win-win. So I think that's something that's not often talked about, but I think it's really, really important. And then, I mean, behind it we had a nice little project team, and I think it's important to have some governance around that project team and get some buy-in from senior stakeholders. And what I did show and tells all throughout the project. So I ran a digital forum, which was just like a drop-in thing, invited services along. It was recorded, so if people couldn't come, they could come back and watch it. And I think, again, it's just about working in the open and kind of sharing as you're going along and really showing people what you're building. And the URL was in the public domain from day one, pretty much. And you could find it and go and have a look at it. And we used that for user testing and kind of had a panel of residents that we regularly checked in with to ask questions and also get them to kind of click around and test stuff for us.
Yeah.
But we did a big bang approach. Sorry, I was just interrupting.
No, I think it's.
But we did a big bang approach, so we basically did it all in one hit. And actually, I like how Will did it a bit more staged. I think it takes some of the pressure off.
I think also we just didn't. So Cumbria's experience is a bit different. So they didn't have Drupal as a core skill, and the team there worked in an agile way. So that wasn't, you know, they understood what that was all about, but they didn't have content design. You know, so the two sort of prerequisites that Melanie was talking around. So their first job was really to try and get those. So, but again, they didn't have very much money to do it. So we did two low value procurements, one for a Drupal freelancer and one for a freelance content designer. And those two were able to come into the team and actually make a big difference quickly. So they had other developers that joined, so there's a bit of knowledge transfer there. They had other content people that joined, and again, they were picking up skills. They're not quite where we want them to be, you know, to go on, but I think give it another sort of 6 months, and I think there will be. So I think there's different ways to do it, but ultimately you need to be thinking about a DDAP shaped team. That's where you will get the most value from this. So if you've got most of the skills, not necessarily all the people, you know, you can't afford sort of 5 to 10 people, but if you've got a little bit, somebody who knows how to do a bit of product design and user research, somebody who can do a bit of Drupal development, somebody who can write, understands the principles of content design. I think if you've got those people somewhere in your team, you're off to a good start, and you can grow that.
And do you find either from senior leadership, Melanie, you mentioned you had to sort of get them bought in, or even just from council technology or digital leads, are there any sort of common misconceptions or things that people need to be reassured about before they engage in this type of approach?
I think it's just the usual thing with websites it's the politics around it, really. You know, obviously everyone has an opinion on design and how it looks, and you know, that's always and I mean, you know, and it's about getting it in front of those stakeholders early on so that you can get their input and their feedback, which I don't think we did particularly successfully, if I'm honest, and we kind of then hurried it a bit at the end, so that's a really big lesson for me. And I hadn't kind of fully understood how much involvement those kind of, and how, you know, that they need just for that reassurance. And I think it's important to have, which we did have, the important answers to some of those questions. So, you know, backing up with your evidence from your user testing, and you know, and I think it's important to actually do what we did before we started the project. We did some user testing on the old site before we started, so we had a really good benchmark of where we were and where we wanted to be. And I think that really helped with that whole evidence. It's like, you know, people, when you talk to stakeholders, they might say, oh, but everyone really likes the website, and you can say, well, actually, they like some of it, but there's some of it they don't like, and these are the bits they don't like are the bits we're trying to make better. And you've got that, you know, you've actually got that in front of it to show people. I would say some of the things that I learned from it.
I think maybe there's some Drupal specific things possibly. So I used to hear a lot that open source was, you know, really something that you shouldn't get involved with. But we found more recently that attitudes have changed almost, you know, 180 degrees. You know, there's a completely different view that open source can actually be a real power for good and save you a lot of time. And councils have gone from sort of there's this idea of sort of giving and taking in the open source world, that councils have gone from being takers to actually being quite active givers in the case of Waltham Forest. So you've got to get your head around that, and I think councils are starting to. I think there's something around how these things are funded. So you know, the debate of sort of project versus team funding, it is a big part of this, and projects seem to still be funded. Well, work still seems to be funded in a project way, and a bit kind of big bang approach, which I hope with this we're starting to break that down, because you don't need the big bang at the start to get going, because you just install the stuff, you know, and that will get you out of the door. And actually sort of using that same amount of money over a longer period of time and actually funding a team to do the work is more sustainable. You stay in touch with technology changes and user needs, user research, and I think we're playing our part in changing minds. And I think a lot of the councils are starting to move in that direction. So maybe those two, it's worth discussion anyway.
Fantastic. And just final question from me would be, clearly you've got this as a publishing platform, but you've got links to sort of service pages. At some point, I assume there's a handoff to some sort of transactional services run by numerous different systems. Can you just make it clear for people, how does the website hand off to some more transactional systems, some of which may have their own front end modules? Is it just a link, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, you go for it, Melanie. How have you done it?
Well, we've done it what we've tried to do is put it front and centre, and we're using the buttons, which are really nice feature of it, so that you kind of push people across using those. But yeah, it does link across. What we've done is replicate our style sheet on some of the portals that we've got many of, like most
so it's
councils.
visually consistent.
So yeah, and kind of carried across things like navigation and stuff like that, where we've been able to, where we've had control of that front end. And we've tried to go, you know, it's like the long tail stuff, isn't it? We've gone for the high volume, the top 80%, and some of the smaller portals we think, well, you know, it's not so many visitors, so not so imperative. But yeah, I think that at the moment I would like to do more on that and make the user journey a bit slicker. I think there's some stuff around we're looking at around single sign-on as well, and how we manage some of that, which might tie back into how people potentially log onto the website rather than those individual portals, and then their authentication's carried through that way. So that's another idea for the roadmap, Will.
Yeah, no, not too much on the roadmap. But I think one of the best examples I've seen is the team at Croydon that I was part of. They created a design system to go along with this. And the idea was that we would design components for the website, but actually design them for reuse on other platforms. And as they're procuring new things, they're actually saying, well, you know, part of this procurement is to make it look consistent and work in the same way. They did do single sign-on, I think, with Active Directory, and Drupal is able to access that in Croydon. So, you know, that's certainly an option for councils that have it. I think also that this kind of goes the other way. We're very interested in the Gov UK single sign-on work and what that might mean for us, and their approach around. I mean, I'm not a massive fan of personalisation, but what you can say is, you know, we know more about you, so we're not going to give you stuff that you don't want anymore. So when you come back to your bins page, it will tell you when your next collection is, rather than having to do a search. So I think the sensible things that we could be doing in the future, if we've got that kind of integration. And I think, you know, we've got to get microsites and these other things out of the way. But once they are, I think, again, we're into a territory that none of us would be able to afford. And I think we can do some good generic work for everybody. It'd be great if some of the councils that are listening to this could be part of that.
Well, fantastic. Thank you both very, very much for very clearly explaining all the remarkable progress you've made to date. Wonderful to see such a successful example of collaboration, dear to my heart with a LOTI hat on, but clearly for the wider local government sector. Why are we endlessly recreating the same components again and again and again? So wish you absolute best of luck. Strongly recommend LOTI boroughs, if you're not already using this, engage. And thank you for sharing your contact details. We'll post those with this video. But thank you for now.
Thanks, Eddie.